Hey, what is up, everybody? Hunter back with another great episode. Today, joined with another Hunter, Hunter Horsley, the CEO at Bitwise. Now, you might be familiar with Bitwise due to their Bitcoin or Ethereum or many of their other ETF products. But today, we get into a lot of the other different ways that they serve participants looking to come from TradFi into the crypto arena by offering them different products and vehicles. We spent a ton of time also talking about the 2025 outlook, what we expect other companies to be doing, how we expect the landscape of regulation to be changing, how the Trump administration, SEC, Department of Labor, all of them are making decisions or potentially going to be making decisions that could have a very big impact on us. At the end of the day, Bitwise and Hunter are a company and a person that I think you should be following, watching what they put out, seeing what they say, as they are tapped in to some of the smartest and most influential people in the space. And I absolutely love what they're doing. You can obviously tell that during this conversation. As always, though, thank you for taking the time to listen to this conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you to Hunter for coming on and spending the time and talking to us. And thank you to loot.gg for sponsoring this episode. Grateful for that. And without any further ado, here is Hunter Horsley. It's finally happened. The Hunter x Hunter live stream. I even put on my Hunter hoodie for this.
Oh
Um,
man, that's
um,
great.
I'm so excited. Today we're joined with Hunter Horsley, the CEO at Bitwise, where ETFs have now become more and more of the narrative here within the crypto industry, where years ago it was a far-fetched idea of, would we ever see a Bitcoin ETF, let alone a ETF, specifically for crypto-facing companies. You are holding the torch, I would say, right now, because you're bridging TradFi to our industry, which is so exciting, which I really want to hammer on as we get into this. But I think firstly, could you tell us, maybe a little bit about yourself, your background, and what Bitwise is doing?
Sure. Gosh, a hunter ex hunter conversation. When I was as a brief aside, I will tell you about, but uh, when I was at Facebook at in that era, you could query information about the user base, and I discovered that there were 6 Hunter Horsleys on Facebook. So, I'm always delighted when it's not 2 Hunter Horsleys, but I'll take it. Um, yeah, so my background, I'm in San Francisco. Bitwise is San Francisco, New York, London offices. Bitwise has been around now for over 7 years, which feels like a lifetime. Um,
It's rare to see a company in this space do 7 years is like a real endurance test.
yeah, I was just at the Digital Asset Summit earlier this week, the Blockworks event in New York, and I saw Sergey and Stani, um, and one of the things that I was just thinking about is, I think when people look at companies and projects and new protocols in the space, they're often valued in what's the use case, what are they trying to accomplish, what's the team, and so on and so forth. But I do think over 7 years, one of the things that's fascinating is, uh, does the team have the endurance? Will the inventors, the leaders of the labs, be around and working as hard 7 years from now as they were when they got started? And it's kind of a fascinating thing to contemplate, as a lens for looking at all the different things in the space and the new things. If there's a project you're excited about, asking yourself, will the leader of that project be working as hard in 7 years as now? And it's been interesting to see how that plays out. And then, of course, on the corporate side, when I got started, the big players were Bitfinex, BitMEX, Zappo and Winces, MG Stover, Arthur
Oh yeah.
Bell. You're right. I don't know if it takes you back a little bit.
Yeah.
So when we got started, Silvergate was the only bank that you could get an account with in America, and you needed reference letters, and they had a 2 month wait list. Um, so it was just sort of a different era, and it's amazing to think about in 2025 where we are, the number of counterparties that are available, the quality of teams working on things, and so on and so forth. But there's a lot we could discuss on the sort of memory lane. But to complete the intro, I'm from California, went to the Wharton School, was a product manager at Instagram and then Facebook, and then left to start Bitwise. And we got started in 2017. And so that's the story on me.
Was your background was fully financial, it sounds like, obviously Wharton, or was it
Yeah.
not?
Well, yeah, at Instagram and Facebook, it was actually just software.
Okay.
So as a product manager, I was working with designers, engineers, business counterparts to build different products. At Instagram, I sort of got very lucky. It was 150 people at the time, and the user base had grown to maybe 300 million. Um, and I think that management said it's time to contribute some revenue to the mothership of Facebook, and so I got to contribute to a broader team that drove revenue to a billion in revenue run rate, which was fascinating to watch. Um, building advertising products, and then worked on software products on the Facebook side as well. So my background was really on the software side, and so as you can imagine, a lot of people said, "Why in the world are you starting an asset management company?" Um,
Yeah, that is a crazy leap.
yeah, yeah, it is a crazy leap.
It is a crazy.
Uh, so my thought on this, I think everyone who's starting something to some extent, um, uh, there's an element that's crazy about starting anything. Um, and there's often sometimes some naivete. Our thinking was that if you want to build a best of breed asset manager for real estate, you should have people who understand risk management and fiduciary investment management, but you should also have people who understand general contractors and zoning permits and building materials and the difference between Chelsea and Lower East Side. Um, and combine those two things, and that's how you can have a best of breed asset manager to navigate the real estate space. And the thought that we had was, well, if you're building an asset manager for crypto, you need investment management, fiduciary investment management, you need risk management, and all of those things, and you need the best class version of those things. But you do also need uh, an understanding of open source software, what version control is, why the selection of using Rust versus OCaml versus Solidity might play a role in how an ecosystem develops, or the ability to garner the interest of developers, and so on and so forth. And so that was the thinking that made us feel like it potentially isn't crazy, that if you wanted to build a best of breed asset manager for crypto, you would want to be bringing together software people with investment management people, and now Bitwise today is fantastic software people and fantastic investment management people. And I do think it's a real benefit that we have, is we sort of get to build the firm from a clean sheet of paper and say, is this the best combination for our clients? But yeah, yeah, at the beginning it did sound crazy.
Well, clearly it's gone very well. You guys have been around for 7 years, and I think, again, back to the word that you mentioned, endurance. Um, it really does speak, because there are a lot of companies that fizzle out and they don't find out how to, like, navigate a very volatile and a very, I would say, treacherous industry, where it's really easy to burn through your capital, and it's really easy to spend a ton of time and put the wrong product out that doesn't have the right fit. And you're also dealing with a large subset of investors who, this isn't their bread and butter. This is not what they grew up, buying for the last 20 years. This is a new asset. And that takes knowledge in how to market that and package that up correctly.
Mhm.
Um, One new package that you are pushing, and we just saw less than an hour ago, you submitted for staked ETH ETF, or the ability to stake ETH within your ETH ETF. Could you expand into that, because that's the newest thing from you guys right now?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So there's a limited amount I can say about
Okay.
a live filing, but indeed, we have a filing to add staking to our Ethereum ETF. I think the thing I can say more generally, without speaking to the specific filing, is that Bitwise wants to help investors do all the things they want to do. And then our project is to navigate what's possible at any given time. And an amazing thing about 2025 is is that more is becoming possible. With Commissioner Peirce leading the crypto task force of the SEC, and chair or interim chair Ueda, and eventually Chair Atkins, there's a really constructive dialogue, and therefore we think that more will be possible, and we want to bring the benefit of more capabilities to investors, and that's what we've been doing for a long time. We launched the first crypto index fund in the US. We launched the first equity ETF after Coinbase went public to help people own the companies generating revenues in the space. We launched one of the first Bitcoin ETFs, one of the first Ethereum ETFs. And so as you know, I think Bitwise's role is, as things become possible, to make sure that they're available to investors to participate in. So I think that there's a journey ahead that's beginning this year where more things will be possible in ETFs and otherwise. And Bitwise has one job, which is to help investors access the opportunities in this space. So we're working on that and a whole host of things to that end.
The way you allude to that makes me think that I'm left curving what I think of an ETF, right? Like there is to like for me, it's like, okay, why buy for I think a lot of people, the first question they always ask is, well, I can go buy Bitcoin on Coinbase. Or I can go buy, Ethereum. I could swap it on a DEX. Why an ETF? And I think obviously there are very obvious answers, but there I think are some non-trivial ones that you're alluding to within your previous answer.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. And it might be fun to talk about, and it might be things that the people who are tuned in are familiar with. But first, the answer varies a little bit depending on the investor.
Mhm.
So if to map out, if I said to somebody building software, we're B2B software, we sell to companies. Well, if those companies are Fortune 500 companies, that's different than if they're Fortune 5,000 companies, and that's different than if they're mid-market enterprises, and that's different than if they're SMBs, and that's different than if they're a dentist or a restaurant. And so those are all B2B businesses, but depending on which segment, there are some different things involved. Similarly, when we talk about serving investors, investors are, of course, not a homogenous set of people, and so there are some different portions. So to answer the question of why would anyone buy a Bitcoin ETF, it's helpful to talk for a moment about who are investors. So one component of investors, and I'm just going to talk through the frame of the US. We also serve investors in Europe, and there's a similar landscape with some differences. In the US, there are individual investors who are investing their own money through brokerage accounts, and those investors invest between $5 and $10 trillion, and they might do it through Robinhood, they might do it through Coinbase, they might do it however. They're making investment decisions about what to do with their money. Those individual investors then also have retirement accounts or IRAs, and that's about $13 trillion. So 5 to 10, 13 trillion in retirement accounts where they're making decisions about their IRA. Then you have wealth managers, which are a different segment. These are investment professionals that are entrusted by tens of millions of Americans to help them figure out what to do between now and the future, such that they wake up in the future with a life that they're happy with, own a home, send a kid to college, etc. And in the US, they manage about $30 trillion. And then a third segment is institutional asset owners. So this would be pensions, endowments, foundations. Endowments and foundations in the US manage about $3 trillion, and pensions manage about $30 trillion. And then we could keep going to talk about insurance companies and sovereign wealth funds, but maybe I'll just leave it at those three buckets for a moment. So for the individual, which we're all individuals, so this applies to all of us. Some individuals like it in their brokerage account because it gives you a lot of peace of mind. You don't have to worry about losing a password. You don't have to worry about getting hacked. You don't have to worry about, let's say your neighbor says, Hunter, I want to buy some Ethereum, and they're not familiar with the difference between Coinbase and FTX. To them, it all looks the same.
Right.
But they have a Charles Schwab account, or they have an E-Trade account, or they have a Robinhood account. And it allows them to just, without having to move money around, without having to understand which apps are safe and which apps are not, they can just take exposure there. And by the way, it's an incredible stack of, there's an incredible set of protections in the ETF. You have a regulated custodian securing the assets, protecting the assets. Then you have an administrator who keeps the books and records as a third party for us in our Bitcoin ETF. That's Bank of New York Mellon. Then you have an auditor for us in the Bitcoin ETF. That's KPMG, who's making sure that everyone's telling the truth and that everything that you say is there is there. In our Bitcoin ETF, we publish the public wallet addresses so you can look and see that it's there. Then we supervise all of that. And then on top of that, you have securities laws. And so that's a pretty, there's a lot of protections in that stack. And they're very
It's a
cost
lot
effective.
more than just a private key.
It's a lot more than a private key, and also to some extent an app.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Where, you don't understand, how are they storing it? Do they have credit risk? Are they solvent? What are what protections do you have? Are they telling the truth? All that type of thing. So I think for some individuals, they can do it from their existing account, and there's a lot of reasons to have peace of mind, and they say, this is good. This works for me. On the IRA front, it's a little bit starker. In IRAs, it's very hard to do it any other way. It's very hard to do it any other way than an ETF. So the ETFs have built a bridge to allow people who have conviction over a very long period of time around digital assets to use the account that's meant for very long periods of time, which is the retirement account. And so some people will buy, Bitcoin or Ethereum or Solana or what have you on Coinbase, but then in their retirement account, they'll use the ETF. So those are some of the reasons for individuals. And I would say that retirement accounts people often forget about, but are, when people talk about institutions, endowments, foundations, these very sophisticated firms, retirement accounts are 4 times larger than those institutions in terms of the amount of assets, 3 trillion versus 13 in the US. So, and I think people often don't think about retirement accounts. Then for wealth managers, and sorry, this is becoming a long-winded tour
No.
of.
This is very, like, personally and selfishly, I love this answer so far. Like, this is good for me.
Right on. Probably everyone listening is bored to tears and is now watching YouTube. But we'll proceed anyways. For wealth managers, they by and large can't use the apps, the exchanges. They have a back end custodian, and that custodian enables them to buy securities. They have a trading team, a compliance team. They have restrictions in their ADV, and so the sort of the corny analogy that I made at some point a few months ago was, it's almost, the ETF is almost like you take a slice of cake, you put it in a piece of Tupperware. You still have a slice of cake, but you can put it more places. And the ETF is the piece of Tupperware, and it allows the wealth manager to access digital assets using all of their existing pipes and plumbing, versus having to rewire a ton of stuff to make a 1% allocation or a 2% allocation. Remember, they have 99 other things to do and worry
Right.
about. And, are our growth stocks in a good position or not? Should we be buying treasuries? Should we be selling treasuries? Are we over allocated to venture? Are we under allocated to venture? What's happening with emerging markets? There's a lot to think about. My client is going through some hardship in their personal life. I want to give them a call. Oh, that's right. I also need to make sure that I'm taking advantage of crypto. Should I rebuild all of my infrastructure and change all of my service providers so I can make a 1% allocation? That's a hard cost benefit to justify. And then you have the ETFs, which have all these protections, and you can leverage. So for wealth managers, it's a huge unlock and ability to suddenly participate. And we're seeing a huge cross section. There are over 5,000 US wealth management teams, multifamily offices, RAs, branches of banks that now own a Bitwise product in their client portfolios. So if people are familiar with, they have a friend who's a financial advisor, they work with a financial advisor, think of the firm that they work at, and then there's 5,000 of those that own a Bitwise product. So it's been really enabling. And then on the institutional side, they can generally do, on the endowment foundation, pension side, they can do anything. They have a lot of sophistication, a lot of flexibility, great teams. And there we're seeing a mix. Some of them will open a custodial account, others will buy the ETF. And I think it's just a preference around how they want to approach it. So
Right.
I have to leave it there because it's the longest winded answer that you've ever suffered through.
No, no.
But
I
those are
mean,
some of the
look,
reasons for
I
different
think at the end of
audiences.
the day, there are a lot of people that do ask that question though of like, why an ETF? And
Mhm.
there are true pros to having like why you would want an ETF. That and again, who is the investor? And a lot of the people that I talk to today are not they're not a they're running a family office. They aren't
Mhm.
running a pension fund.
Sure.
And to them, they can just go and make something on Coinbase and throw capital into it and buy. It's very different for select groups. So good answer. I
Yep.
appreciate it. One area
Yep.
that you started to touch into there is the different individuals and types of people that are looking at the ETF, and then obviously the different institutions. Can you talk a little bit on like the demographic change that you're seeing possibly? Like,
Yeah.
I think we're seeing that on like an individual, like personal side, but also an institution, like who all of a sudden is having this appetite for digital
Yeah.
assets.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And just one other thing I want to append on the ETF front is that, I was really talking through the lens of a Bitcoin ETF or an Ethereum ETF, which is just holding a spot asset. Of course, uh, the Bitwise Crypto Industry Innovators ETF, that's a portfolio of 30 public companies, or OwnB, our new ETF for Bitcoin Standard Corporations. There's an additional reason to do it, which is that we're managing a portfolio, which is harder to do yourself. And so, maybe to state the obvious, but just wanted to note that. In
Of
terms
course.
of the demographics, so Schwab did this fascinating survey. Gosh, maybe 6 months ago, where they asked clients a whole host of things about their investment plans, but they also asked them the asset classes that they're interested in investing in, and they asked them about crypto, they asked them about U.S. equities, fixed income, real assets, which includes real estate and commodities, international equity, and alternatives. Um, for millennials, who I believe today are 28 to 40, I believe that that's the range for millennials today. The number one asset class that they plan to invest in over the next year was crypto, 62%. The number two was U.S. equity at 48%, and then down from there. So for individuals 28 to 40, this wasn't a survey by a crypto company. This is a survey by the largest brokerage, one of the largest brokerages in America. Um, People 28 to 40 plus or minus said the number one asset class I plan to invest in is crypto. For Gen X, which again I just don't, I'm not sharp on the exact age ranges, but
You're good.
I think it's 40 to 55 or thereabouts.
Yep.
Um, the number one asset class was U.S. equities, and the number two was crypto,
Hmm.
and the number three was bonds. Um, uh, and so there again, I mean, that is just remarkable. And then baby boomers, which I think are 55 to 70 plus or minus. Um, the number one is U.S. equity. The number two was bonds. The number three was real assets. The number four was international equities. And then second to last was crypto. So a very stark drop off between 40 to 55 and 55 to 70. Dramatic, right? So from the second to top to the second to bottom, split there.
Is that could you mark that off to like risk appetite?
There's all sorts of things. I think there's all sorts of things. And of course, this is just a data point. The
Sure.
reality is that we have clients across the whole age range. I think that there's, for people who are later in life, sometimes there's just we want to generate income, we want stability. It's a common phenomenon, to start tilting portfolios away from risk towards income. Um, there is, I think, also uh, a level of intuition. Um, there are young people today who are 15 years old who are doing things. I don't know if you remember an app called Be Real, where you had to like
Yeah.
send a photo to get a photo back, and
Yep.
there's snap streaks, and at the same time, there's a generation to whom a Snapchat streak is like a completely foreign concept, and you can't even imagine what that is. And there's a generation who watch esports streaming, and there's another generation that just doesn't. They weren't introduced to that. They didn't come up with that. So, and of course, there's the classic things around tech savviness. So I think that there's also a way in which there's an intuitiveness to certain generations and the people around it. So I think that those things play into it. I will say also that there's a lot of experience with Gen X and baby boomers. They've seen a lot of things play through, and so I think sometimes are want to see things play out more because they've seen things go wrong in the past in a way that younger generations don't have the benefit of that wisdom. So I think it's all of those things intertwined. And again, the reality is that we have clients across the whole range. But I think it's illustrative maybe of a general phenomenon, which is 28 to 55. I think really resonates with this asset class. And I think what does that mean? It doesn't really mean. I think the main thing that it means is that a lot of people want to participate in this asset class. A huge tonnage of people, 28 to 55, want to participate in this asset class. And I think that the result of that is that um, every institution is going to come into crypto because they all exist at the end of the day to serve their customers, to serve their clients. And particularly this year, as the regulatory environment has switched from a headwind to a tailwind, um, and it's become clear that crypto is welcome in the United States, and even a step further, the United States wants to foster crypto in America. There's no longer um, that risk, and then there's a lot of interest from clients, and businesses exist to serve their clients. So that gravity is gonna be a reason that you're gonna see more and more stories about. You saw Stripe buying a stable coin infrastructure company. I think yesterday or maybe last week, news that Twitter or X is planning to build a mobile wallet.
And you
You've seen
you
some
actually made a
stories about.
comment on that I
Yeah.
thought was interesting. I have to ask you to elaborate on it because your reply to Lily was people really underestimate the number of companies that are building with crypto integrated into them and what's coming in 2025. What I mean, in your head, do you just think it's gonna be this powder keg moment of everybody to serve their customers is starting to look and be like, "Well, we have to integrate crypto payments in some way," even if it's not like, hey, they want to send crypto, but it
Mhm.
allows for a faster and more seamless operation on the back end.
Yeah, yeah. I think that a moment. I'll get to some specific examples, but at a very high level, an interesting thing about this moment is that people have been familiar with Bitcoin and crypto for a decade. It's been in the news for a decade. And so everyone feels familiar with it and feels like they know roughly how much progress happens in a given year. They know that it's volatile. They know that it's 100,000 was a recent high for Bitcoin. They know that there's this company called Coinbase, um, and so on and so forth. As a byproduct of that, the fact that they've observed it for many years, um, they're not expecting the pace of change to really accelerate this year. Um, and I think the point that to me at this moment feels worth making is the pace of change is about to drastically accelerate. 2025 is not going to be like 2024 or slightly faster than 2024. It's going to be substantially different. Um, there's my colleague Teddy Fasaro, who's the president of Bitwise, has read me this quote from Winston Churchill, which was, "It's not the end, it's not the beginning of the end, but it is the end of the beginning." So the beginning is over. We're now in the mainstream moment.
Yep,
And because of the change to the regulatory environment in the US, because of the demographic, the sheer tonnage of people who want to be involved in this asset class, the fact it's a $3 trillion asset class with 100 million owners already today, companies exist to serve their customers. Companies were unsure about doing that because of the regulatory overhead and complexity. That's falling away. Companies are now going to start serving their company customers in this space. That doesn't mean it shoots up to the number one priority on the corporate to do list, but for some of them it is, and it will compound because you can be sure that every payments company that competes with Stripe took note that they bought a stablecoin infrastructure company. And
exactly.
so now, wherever it landed on their list after the inauguration, it just moved up slightly because of Stripe. And then if another payments company gets involved, it'll move up further. And so the pace of adoption will accelerate, not decelerate. I think you'll see banks launching custody. I think you'll see banks accepting stable coins this year. I think you'll see Bitcoin-backed loans this year. I think that you'll see fintech companies offering credit products and payments. You're not going to see it all play out this year. You'll see the sort of first cohort move, but I think it will surprise people. And as an analogy, if you think back to if you can remember when the iPhone came out in 2007, I had a BlackBerry at the time, and I really thought the iPhone was worthless because it had no keyboard. Um, and jokes on me. And at the time, the sort of the vibe was this is for fun, but it's not a work device. It's for listening to music, taking photos of your lunch, but it's not for serious businesses. And they weren't allowed at work, and everyone kept having Blackberries at work for a long time. And then fast forward to 2015 or 2016, and Goldman was giving employees iPhones. Here's your work phone. It's an iPhone, and the BlackBerry is completely gone. And I think that journey is about to take place, and we'll wake up in 5 years and be, wait a minute, like the back end of this is Uniswap. This, my transfer actually didn't just hop across ACH; it just hopped across USDC on Aptos. So it won't all play out this year, but I think we're at the end of the beginning, and now entering a next chapter where we're going to see a lot more people doing things.
I love that quote. Yeah, I'm very excited for wires to take a few seconds instead of 3 days and
Oh my
jump into
gosh.
it is, I will say being part of the crypto industry has made me, very sensitive to sending wires now.
Yeah.
Um, where one other part of this that, this idea of, like, new developments, new, things being launched is obviously there's Bitcoin and there's ETH, but now we're starting to venture into non-major cryptocurrency tokens and ETFs. So, we're seeing I think we saw the Sui, we saw Solana, we've seen Doge, we've seen rumors of others, and then today a notable one from Canary being Pengu.
Pengu.
Um, and the only reason this conversation is happening today is because we both have Penguin PFPs. We're Pudgy Penguin holders. We're in the same chat. We started talking. Um, so the power of Penguin and Pengu, I think community cannot be understated. I got to give a shout out to all my fellow Pengu holders. Um, but we're starting to see newer, like not like things that I never would have expected you to tell me a meme coin that was launched 6 months ago would have an ETF filing.
Yep.
What's your how do you view this? Do you like the appetite for these different ETFs? Um, and I think one question, maybe like not to pack this into
Mhm.
too big of a question, is like how do
Hack
you view
away.
like how do you view this from like a inflow side? Like we've seen massive inflow to BTC. We haven't seen the same like massive inflow for ETH. But like these other alternative assets that traditional people might not be familiar with, what's going to drive that massive inflow, if any?
Well, on the inflow portion of the question, um, we talked a little bit about who investors are. There's the
Mm,
individuals and their self-directed accounts and their retirement accounts. There's wealth managers. There's endowments and foundations. So uh, inflows are just one or more of those pockets of investors deciding that they want exposure. So the question that then becomes, which of those investors do you think wants exposure to the asset that's being put in the ETF? Um, and and that would drive your expectations. I think that we serve a lot of wealth managers in the US, and I think that um, these are smart people. They're amazing people because they're the partner for your neighbor, for your mother, for your brother, for anyone who says, please help me figure out how to have the financial future I want to have, my plans. And this is the human that they select. And then that human feels tremendous responsibility and is very busy because they have to navigate all these asset classes. And they're awesome people, and they keep track of everything that's going on, but they care about humans deeply. Um, And I think where they're at is they believe that there's opportunity in this asset class and they want to help their clients participate in that. Um, but it's a lot, it's confusing. And the space is often, I think the greatest sin of the space is that the most confusing messenger of crypto is the crypto industry itself, who says all these different things, and people have a limited amount of time. So I think the journey for wealth managers are that they have it on their to-do list to participate in the space. They've heard the most about Bitcoin. They've heard it's digital gold. That kind of makes sense. They've heard about Ethereum. They've heard about Solana. And then they know that there's a lot of different projects that people are excited about different things, but they're not yet sure what to do about that. What should they do about that? Are they going to own 17 different ETFs, each of them at a quarter of a percent in size? Are they going to just own Bitcoin and then potentially, maybe that means that they invested in AOL and they missed Google and Microsoft, and they're going to feel like they tried to do it for their clients, but then they really missed. So I think for a lot of the wealth management part of the industry, some of them are just so well informed that they will have specific views, and they'll say, I want to own Ethereum and Aptos, and I don't want to own this other thing, or I want to own just Bitcoin, and I have a very specific reason why. I think a lot of them over time are going to use something like the Bitwise 10 Crypto Index Fund, BITW, which is an index, and helps them take exposure to the whole asset class and not have to pick specific assets. And that's what they do for emerging markets. They're not picking different companies in Egypt to invest in. They're saying, I want international equities exposure, and then the index makes those decisions for them. And the same thing with the ag, with bonds, or even with large cap growth stocks, with the Qs. They're not picking 100 names themselves. So I think that you're going to see more and more adoption, but I think people will start using the index fund more. I think that they'll use things like BATQ more, which is an index of companies, or OwnB, which is another index of companies. That's wealth. I think then on the two ends of the spectrum, individuals, I think individuals, they develop conviction. They may say that I like Palantir. I don't like Lockheed Martin. I don't like Raytheon. I like Palantir.
Right.
And I'm going to buy the Palantir stock. And I also am going to buy Solana. I have conviction on that thing. So I think individuals who are a very large part of the market will likely leverage these products for the reasons, the benefits mentioned. And then on the institutional side, I think there'll be some of that as well, where they want to express a specific thesis, or they want to trade around a specific view. But with the Bitcoin ETF, for instance, is all three. All three found the Bitcoin ETF useful. Whereas I think for single coin ETPs, for just for one asset, it might be a subset of the group.
Right. Makes sense. It's a good way to look at it. Or I understand that far better now. The one that I know everybody a lot, or most people here specifically, are interested about is obviously this filing with Pengu, and I understand that there are limits of what you can talk about and can't talk about. What we saw happen today was a filing; it wasn't an approval. I mean, for me, it's interesting because we're seeing Luca take he's very excited about getting new people, a new tool of getting exposure in. Um, we also kind of touched on the non-trivial ways of how ETFs would be looked at and used on the investment side, but also on the creator side, I guess you would say. Does that do how I'm trying to without directly asking questions I know you can't answer. I mean,
Sure.
what is your take on the Pengu ETF? You hit me with it.
Yeah. My vantage point on the space is that I want to see the space succeed, and if it's a high quality team with a vision that has merit, I hope that it works out. Now, of course, I also specifically love Pudgy Penguins, and I think Pengu is a very exciting project. So specifically, I also just love that. So I'm happy to see people launching things and filing for things and so on and so forth. I think Luca and the Igloo team are killer. So, what is my take? My take is I think that's great. Again, you have to go back to if the question is, Hunter, do you think this will be a very large ETF? Then for anyone who's been hasn't fallen asleep in this conversation, that the way I would think about that is individuals in their taxable account, um, individuals in their retirement account. If you own Pengu in your taxable account, do you also want to own your retirement account? There's an opportunity. Does the wealth manager want to own it? Does the endowment foundation pension want to own it? And then you just make some assumption. I'm not omniscient. We have clients, we get feedback, and so on and so forth. I think the answer is probably that an ETF will always expand the audiences that can buy something, and probably always increase the TAM, and so I think it'll be a good thing. Yeah.
Are you guys exploring adding ETFs for specific meme coins, such as Pengu?
Um, we definitely are doing more. We have a number of live filings right now.
Mhm.
I think that um, we just want to do. I mean, I told you sort of my lens. Is it
Yep.
a high quality team? Is it a project that has merits and a vision for a role to play in people's lives that's worthwhile? Um, then there are a few other sort of operational things. So um, with ETFs, there's usually a lot of analytical criteria that have to be met. Um, how big is the liquid market? What is the history of the liquid market? Um, in prior, if you go back, if anyone wants some brain damage, you can go back and read the approval of the Bitcoin ETF filings. We had to do statistical analysis on the price discovery between futures and spot markets. So far, the ETFs that have been approved have been for ETFs with spot assets. The spot assets have had to have futures trading. Um, that may change. Everything is sort of evolving this year. But this was the analysis of can this happen now? And then there's a lot of work that goes into the analysis. For the Bitcoin ETFs, we did hundreds of pages of research.
Hmm.
Um, and so then there's a question of, do you have a large enough organization and team that you're serious about doing the work that's necessary for this filing to happen? Now, of course, things can change, and it might be the case that in the future you don't have to do that work. But when you file for an ETP, a spot ETP, you basically begin a process of collaborating with the SEC, who plays an important role of making sure that things are safe for investors, and is going to ask you questions, and then they're going to ask you to do some homework and help them understand some things, and that means meetings, it means research, it means so there's a question about, is this thing ready to go through that moment? And then there's also a question of how many things can you sign up to do and do well. And then after that, there's a question, of course, about is there, across all those different types of investors, how many people want this at this moment? And I think generally the answer will always be that there are people who will benefit from there being an ETF. But those are some of the things that I think about. And
Hmm.
we're doing, we have over 30 investment solutions today. If
Yeah,
people
you
go
guys
to,
have a lot.
we have a lot. Yeah. And so we want to have more. And you know, again, Bitwise's aspiration is to try to understand everything that's going on, and to try to be true to the intentions of what's going on. And then to help educate busy people on what's happening, what are the things that could be interesting to you, and then to help them participate in that in ways that work for them through these investment solutions. So we're an agent of doing that. And today Bitwise is 100 people. We do tens of thousands of meetings, we put out research, we go to over 100 events a year. So we're working as hard as we can to try to build bridges to this space, and to tell stories about the space that are grounded in the truth and spirit. So I remember, we know a lot of these fantastic people, the Bitcoin core devs, who do work to maintain the Bitcoin core code base. And I think some people wonder if an ETF will be bad because versus the spot asset, because it loses some of those properties of self sovereignty. And
Hmm.
so we decided to publish the public wallet addresses of the Bitcoin ETF, which is not a necessary thing, and nobody else ended up doing that. But to try to keep some of the soul of what's
Yep.
unique about a public blockchain present in the context of this format that is really helpful to people, but not to lose track of. So I'm saying a ton of things here, but hopefully people are getting an impression, or you're getting an impression of how I think about this, which is we want to do as much as we can to build bridges. We have an amazing group of people at Bitwise,
You
and
feel like part of the community and not a um I mean, that Bitwise has always felt like you guys feel like you're part of the crypto community, not an outsider coming in saying like, "Hey, I want to be a part of this." You guys have come from our side and say, "Hey, we want to bring in TradFi. We want to bring in the people who aren't here, and we don't want to, uh, I, screw it all up because we understand like the ethos of what we're coming from, which I think cannot be understated. There are so many people that I think I've seen and not naming anybody, but they have come in and just kind of wrecking balled and said, "All right, it's going to be done the way it's been done the last 100 years. Screw the way you guys do it. It's going to be done our way." Which
Mhm.
I mean, you guys should be applauded for.
That's very kind. We definitely feel like we're part of the community, and um, yeah, it's very kind, and I think that we talked a little bit earlier about endurance and stamina and so on and so forth, and I think part of what can be so meaningful about this space to people professionally is that you feel like you're part of something bigger than just you or your company's role in the space.
Hmm.
And that's, I think, how we feel at Bitwise. We sometimes say that we're trying to be good stewards. We're trying to be good stewards of your neighbor's capital that's invested in one of our ETFs, and good stewards of the underlying ecosystems that those investments are participating in. And we're not the most important organization in crypto, and we don't, but we try to be a positive player in it.
Of course. So on the topic of stewards, we're in a moment right now where one of the biggest stewards for crypto has been the Trump administration. We've gotten the strategic Bitcoin reserve, we've gotten a crypto reserve, we've gotten the SEC
Mhm.
to close a ton of cases. We had a crypto ball during the inauguration week. I mean, there's some crazy weird things where like I looking back, I'm like, damn, that actually happened. Um, you have been a participant within, I think, conversations that have happened around Capitol Hill and pushing for the right things to happen. What's your take on the current landscape, given what's happened the beginning of 2025 since this election happened?
What is my take? We've been around for 7 years. We've been part of different administrations, different regulatory appointments, and so on and so forth. I just think it cannot be overstated how incredible this development is. Um, Everyone in crypto has only lived through headwinds or still wins, and has literally never experienced tailwinds.
It's
Uh,
weird. It is so weird.
it's weird, and I also think that um, it's hard for a lot of people to perceive because uh, it happens in these closed door roundtables. It happens not at the cadence of crypto is a very fast paced place. Things move, and I was chatting with somebody in government, and I won't be specific, but he was like, we're sprinting. He's like, I haven't even had a chance to use the bathroom. We only have 60 days to do this. I think to a lot of people in crypto, 2 months feels like a lifetime. Like, people are wondering, why something takes a week. So I do think that the impact of what's taken place on the regulatory front is just getting going. And I think to the extent people thought that there'd be an inauguration and then 2 weeks later, everything that was going to happen would have happened by then. That's not quite right for the way that uh, uh, the government works. But I just have to say it's probably one of the most important things, aside from Satoshi's white paper, that has happened relative to this space flourishing in a long time. And you're seeing it. I mean, and you're seeing these drum beats. And if you write them on a piece of paper, you have to be sort of stunned. There's an executive order so shortly after the inauguration You have the announcement of a strategic Bitcoin reserve and a crypto asset stockpile. You have the roundtable of executives. There are other private gatherings that are taking place. You have Bo Hines and President Trump at the Digital Asset Summit this week, both saying this is important. We should be there and speak there. You have market structure legislation being worked on, stablecoin. You have the SEC appointing Commissioner Peirce to focus on crypto assets. You've seen, gosh, almost a dozen enforcement cases be thrown out. I mean, it's been 2 months since the administration changed. A dozen cases thrown out. SAB 121 overturned. New filings are not getting rejected right when they go in. So the gears are turning, and I think it's remarkable.
It feels like it's the most exciting time to be in our industry, and it does fall back to that, it's the end of the beginning, but certainly not the end.
Yeah.
And again, only I mean, we're less than 3 months into this.
Mhm.
You guys made some predictions and posted your 2025 predictions. There were some notable ones. Bitcoin and again, these are predictions. I wanna put a huge asterisk here. Anything, like that. There is some research that went into this and some thesis.
Mhm.
You guys have a reasoning behind these theses. But Bitcoin to $200,000, Coinbase stock to $700, as well as being added to the S&P 500. Um, Seeing 5 IPOs of crypto unicorns, AI agent coin launch mania, where that basically making the meme coin mania that we saw look like a blip on the chart. And then I think the most notable of these, and I know some of these are you hear people are going to hear and be like, okay, Bitcoin to 200K, Coinbase is $700 sounds insane right now. But the notable one that I read and I went, that seems like the most important prediction here is the Department of Labor allowing 401k participants or relaxing on the 401k
Mhm.
participants to be able to buy crypto with
Mhm.
that capital.
Mhm.
Um, these are great bold predictions, but I want to hammer on the Department of Labor because we've seen
Sure.
the SEC's uh you know
Mhm.
destruction of these cases and say throwing them out. The Department of Labor could potentially open up real like a massive tsunami wave of capital into the industry.
Mhm.
Um what do you think that's going to look like from like a how they approach it and what has to happen for that to become reality?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. So every year we put out these predictions, and we actually go back. Matt Hogan, our CIO, who's on Twitter. Uh, I believe that we publish every year also a scorecard in hindsight for how many we got right and how many we got wrong. I think last year we got 7 out of 10 right or thereabouts, and we've done them for a few years now. So just thought I'd mention that.
Which I
It
love
takes.
that you guys do this, by the way. It's great.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Um, uh, yeah, I mean, so in the U.S., 401k plans are a huge pocket. Again, if everyone who's listening thinks about, do I have a brokerage account? Do I have an IRA? Do I have a 401k? Do I have a pension? A lot of people today have a 401k, and what you can invest in that 401k is constrained and by the Department of Labor's policy. Um, and and I think that part of our view here is that the mandate is so clear from the election last year about the relationship to digital assets in America. And there's also a conversation going on in investment communities in America about um, how Americans in America are ill-equipped for people's retirement. There's a conversation about Social Security. There's a conversation about how pensions are generally don't have enough money to pay for their pensioners' retirement, and 401k plans are an important component of retirement in America. And so the intersection of these two things is uh, the investment community focused on retirement knows that the way things are today is not set up for success and that some sorts of changes need to be made. And then the new administration is constructive on Bitcoin and on crypto being uh, a first class citizen as an investment opportunity for Americans. the intersection of those two things is why are people constrained from making it a component of their company sponsored retirement plan. An IRA they can invest today, which is also a retirement account. So our view there is sort of the intersection of those two things playing through this year. I just remind people that a year in crypto is long, and the things that you were thinking about just 2 months ago are different than the things you're thinking about today, and so there's a lot that can happen in a year. But that's some of the thinking behind that prediction. And actually today I was chatting with a friend who's at Google, and he figured out how to. I guess there's a thing in 401ks called brokerage link in some cases where you can actually uh, uh, open a brokerage access in your 401k, and so he bought a Bitwise ETF there doing that.
Oh,
So in some cases that's actually possible. I was actually unaware of that, but yeah. Anyways, that's our thinking on this one.
it's again, there's a lot of tailwinds, there's a lot of things that could happen, and it's clear that the current admin, it just feels like everybody at this point is like, all right, like let's get on with it. Like, crypto's been around for 10 years.
Yep.
It's proven to be a valuable asset. It is volatile, but there's an appetite for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
it's
think
not
that the
just go ahead.
no, please you.
I was gonna say, and it's not just these shadowy, hoodied kids in their basements trading anymore. It is the largest governments in the world. It is the
Mhm.
largest institutions in the world. It is some of the most blue chip named companies in the world saying, "All right, we're gonna add it to our balance sheets. We're a part of this now."
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
you don't see people like that touching things that it's not they're not speculative companies or institutions. They do things with intent, and for the most part, these are companies and governments are their goal is to obviously run their countries, but they want to make money. They don't want to
Yeah.
lose money. Um,
Right.
and so I think there's some also you can read into how they that decision shows what they think is going to happen.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm curious with all this said though, Bitwise, and again, another chance. I hope you can touch on some things that maybe we skipped over here, but um, you guys are positioning yourselves to be a leader within the bridge of crypto to TradFi, but also I would say you're a leader in both areas. Um, differentiating yourself from others and making sure that you are like the go-to ETF provider for a lot of people. How are you as a CEO approaching that right now?
You're very kind to say those things. We work very hard, and we try to do the right things for clients and for the space.
We're gonna
But
write it off
certainly,
to fellow hunter bias, right?
yeah, yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, same. Nice things about Hunter, but uh, we'll I think if there's one sort of structural advantage that Bitwise has is that we have one focus, and we will keep going.
Hmm.
And I think again, we talked about 7 years, we talked about endurance. I think a thing that a lot of clients have come to appreciate about Bitwise is um, we were talking to them about the space in 2017. When the market crashed in 2018, we showed up and we're there to help. When the market was up in 2019, 2020, when we were there. In 2022, when the market crashed, we were there, and they feel the comfort that we'll be there in the future. And so, um, I think the thing that we can do is continue to try to bring together a really talented group of people to think about how do we do the right thing for clients and the ecosystem, but then also just to stay focused on what we're doing. Whereas I think a lot of other firms ultimately have to turn their attention to, okay, there's a lot going on right now in private credit. We need to invest there, or there's a lot of change taking place in the bond market. We need to turn our attention there because that's most of our clients are using us for bonds and so on and so forth. Um, what do I think about as a CEO? Um, gosh, I'm thinking more about how can we continue to um, play a productive role for the ecosystem. So if uh, if people look at our Bitwise Invest as our Twitter handle, We've done some things this year where we're sponsoring two open source developers at Bitcoin Park um, in Nashville. A new Bitcoin space opened in San Francisco called Presidio Bitcoin. We're sponsoring two Bitcoin developers there. We've made some donations to Protocol Guild and PBS to help support the Ethereum ecosystem, to OpenSats, Brink, and Human Rights Foundation around the Bitcoin ecosystem. And we're doing more and more to um, try to be just a helpful role. I mean, this ecosystem is a community, and everyone should be contributing to it. So I think a little bit about that, and how can we help champion and tell the stories um, of some of the incredible things that talented teams are working very hard on. I'm also thinking about Bitwise today does a lot of things for clients. So there are three parts of our business. There's market access, help people get access to the things they want to invest in, or beta. And that's our Bitcoin ETF. We run the largest crypto index fund in the world. We've talked about OwnB, the new ETF for Bitcoin standard corporations. And we have products in Europe, a very large Bitcoin ETF, an Ethereum staking product, a Solana staking product. That's one part of our business. A second part of our business is helping investors participate in alpha. This is much less known. Some people know Jeff Park through Twitter. He's our head of alpha strategies. And because these are not public, they're not publicly traded, these are separate accounts and private vehicles, that's lesser known. But we continue to think about how can we solve something for, we have a client who asked us to write options on several hundred Bitcoin to generate yield through a separate account, and we're solving that for them, and a few others now. So how can we help people accomplish those objectives? And then the third part of our business is we just call it on-chain, or on-chain solutions. And today we're one of the largest providers of Ethereum staking, and we have other things in the works there. So if an investor says, I have these spot assets, and I'd like to have a relationship with Bitwise and be able to call somebody and know that you're going to, over the next 7 years, be thinking about how to protect my assets, and we'll always be there to answer the phone. But what I want to do is not buy an ETF. I want to stake my assets, and I hold them in self custody. We have solutions for that, and the way that these all come together is we want to help investors participate in the space however they want to, and then have an organization that has excellence and staying power. So I think a little bit also about just what are the solutions that investors need from us right now, across all three of those areas. We're building new things in all three of them. Again, the ETPs are the most public, and just by their very nature. And also, how do we continue to communicate to people that we can support a wide range of what they want to do? Because I think the Bitcoin ETF is so prominent, people know that, or people know OwnB, the equity ETF, but they may not know that we are one of the largest providers of Ethereum staking, and stake several $billion of Ethereum for people in self-custody wallets, or through a custodian. So I'm thinking about that, and then lastly, I'm thinking a little bit about growing the organization. We're 100 people today. It's such an incredible group of people. They could all be doing something easier professionally, and choose to spend every day working on this space, and just continue to think about growing the organization and the capabilities and things like that. So those are some of the things that I'm thinking about.
It's amazing, man. It really is. And it's almost meta the way you were describing that, of you guys are allowing people to do what they want with their money. Which, that was kind of like the ethos of like Bitcoin and Ethereum and cryptocurrency in the beginning, was you can do it, you own it. Nobody can say you can't do X, Y, or Z with it. If you want to send it, if you want to burn it, you can. And now we have people that want access to these assets, and you're building the vehicles or the products to let them take capital and do what they want with it. Um, it's amazing. It really is.
Yeah, it's actually pretty wild today. Sometimes chat with for instance, we have an exceptional head of fund admin and controls, and And today we have publicly traded partnerships. We have 40 Act ETPs, 33 Act ETPs, hedge fund solutions, private vehicles, onshore and offshore, separately managed accounts, non-custodial staking. I mean, the range of different, you know, formats basically that help again build these bridges that fit with what people want to do or the setup they have is pretty broad. And again, most conversations we have are just about the ETPs. But we're trying again to build bridges so that people can just say, I'm busy. I want to do this thing, and I want to do it with a partner so that I can be confident over the next 10 years. But there's a lot that has to get built to enable that.
Eh, so much must have changed since the first day 7 years ago, when this started, because that is quite the array of things. Um, Man, Hunter,
Yeah.
I can't thank you enough for taking the time to chat with me today, and talk
Total
about what
pleasure.
you do, and give some insight on the industry and certain assets, etc. But look, I you're always welcome back to chat when you guys are up to stuff. If there's anything else you want to leave us with, feel free to.
We've
But
got we've got a lot more coming, so I'd say stay tuned, and maybe we can chat again. But we have sort of almost on a monthly basis we have things coming. So we tweet about it, or we try to share about it. But yeah, I'm very excited about the
I
things
I
we
really
we have.
hope I encourage people to go check out your website. One, to check out the what you guys do in more detail, but the content you guys put out from an analysis standpoint is really useful. And then some of your employees, I think your CIO and some others,
Yep.
even their Twitters, they tweet some. There's a lot of really useful things that you guys put out. So I just want to
Thank you.
highlight that for anybody who's listening right now to go check it out.
Thank you. Thank you.
But Hunter, thanks again. Appreciate it. Looking forward to what you guys do next. And again, just thank you, man.
Yeah, thank you. Really enjoyed the conversation. This is fun.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you go check out Hunter Horsley, and Bitwise on Twitter. And as always, thank you for joining in today. Cheers.